Okay, as Sam is resolving our sign-in link issue, I'll just start talking about belonging. We all belong here on the planet. That's why we're here. And so it's really those of us that are in this work, we're in service. You know, we're serving students, and we're just serving the greater good and whatever you believe in. But I just feel like we're here to help people. And a big part of feeling and receiving someone's help is feeling like I belong someplace. And schools are huge for students to experience belonging. And so, because we all have at our core this desire to be loved, seen, and heard, it's important. And because the students spend so much time in the classrooms, we have an opportunity to cultivate an environment where they can feel belonging. And so when an LGBTQ plus student experiences belonging, their mental health is actually better. And all of us in general, but in particular, we're going to be talking about some of the unique challenges that LGBTQ plus students face in their exploration. So when we experience belonging, a sense of belonging, we're expressing our true selves. And as this slide you can see on the bubbles on the right and the left, is people reinforcing that for us. And the people that reinforce that for us are in our work lives, in our families, our friends, and our social groups. So some of the risk factors to the mental health, to having good mental health for LGBTQ plus students, I see at the very top of this list, rejection. And because rejection is very common for someone when they're coming out, or they have a fear of experiencing rejection, we can start to experience all the other things. We can experience anxiety, depression, our self-esteem can be impacted. We can enter into unhealthy or unsafe relationships because we're seeking this sense of belonging in an unhealthy way. When we have extreme rejection and people around us are not reflecting us back accurately, sometimes we can experience feelings of not wanting to be on the planet anymore. LGBTQ plus students have a higher rate of homelessness than the general population for the reasons I mentioned about being afraid of coming out. Sometimes when LGBTQ plus students come out, they are not allowed to live in their homes anymore. And so they can end up on the streets or living in their cars. And that is what I know the Epicenter is an amazing resource for. So, you know, this is why we're doing this work together, is that when we have students that are experiencing some of these stressors, we have resources for them. Substance use is very high and common in the LGBTQ plus world because feelings of depression and anxiety are causing feelings of not wanting to live in the moment. And so people can turn to substances, and that can become a problem. So when we have the positive things in our lives, so these are called the protective factors, and that can help enhance someone's mental health. So if they're having a hard time, these are the things that can help them. So the family and peer acceptance, so being accepted by those around us, having connections and support with the people that we love and people that we are social with. If we have strong coping skills, then we can cope with some of the stressors that we're all experiencing. I know for sure in the pandemic, this student population was really having a hard time because, you know, things became more. They were already having difficulties, and then we had the stressor of the pandemic, and so those social pieces that were lifelines for them and for many were impacted. So when someone has so what we're working on in Monterey County is developing a network of affirmative care for LGBTQ plus students. And that is when we're going to the doctor and we're getting our mental health treatment, that we feel safe doing that. And we feel good about going to our provider, and we feel like our provider understands us and they see us. So that's a protective factor when we have that. And I know that there's certainly a lot of work to do in our county, but there are resources. And then when we have positive attitudes and values and beliefs, that can help us. So if I have an optimistic outlook on life and I'm experiencing rejection, that can help me cope a little bit more. seeing that there is hope for the future, so I can leverage those protective factors as well. So teachers, we know that the relationship, and we talked about this in the SLAM session overview, but the relationship is, so when you leave this session, we're going to give you some, like, a lesson, but the relationship, it's not necessarily like a tangible thing. So I'm going to be talking about concepts and ways, practices, and because they're relational, and how do we interact, and things that we need to keep in mind about LGBTQ plus students and things that they're experiencing that can help you in your exchanges with them. So we're going to supplement that with a classroom lesson, so you have something to walk away with, but also something that will help your relationships, which is really more centered around our heart and the work that we're doing. Takes us out of our minds. So if you're an Instagrammer or anything, if you like the filters, I love them. I love filters. They can really change the mood and feeling of things. But what I love about just bringing in this concept of the filter in our relationships, any relationship, is that we all see through our own lens. We all have our own lens. My lens isn't any better or than yours. Better or worse than yours. It's just different. And so when we interact with so many different people in a day, and so understanding what's your filter, because that's how you relate to other people. That's what you bring into the relationship. So what our filter is made up of is our 5 senses, what we're seeing, what we're taking in, what we're hearing, what we believe, what do we value, all the things we know that come through our intellect, this is the mind base, things that we remember, our traumas, and our sense of self-identity. And so that we can be very firm and strong in our sense of identity, but sometimes when we end up in conflict with one another, it's because we can't see outside of our own filter. We can't see somebody else's through someone else's lens. We can't, because it's not our lens. But we also need to understand that the conflict is really internal. It's something that we're having a hard time with. And if that other person is also having a hard time, because we're not able to take the perspective of another. So that's just something to keep in mind of when you're interacting with everybody in the world, but in particular with LGBTQ plus students, is what's your filter around gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, because that is a huge piece of what you bring into your relationships. So what I'm going to do is break down each of these essential practices, and I'm going to define them, and I'm going to give application for each one of these essential practices. So they're just relationship practices, the things that we do on a daily basis, or things that we can, if we're having a hard time, practice. That's why it's a practice. We have to do it. Sometimes it's going to go well, sometimes not so well. And then that's how we learn. So I'll start with acceptance. Acceptance, the action or process of being received as adequate, suitable, and is typically to be admitted into a group. And so what we have in schools is a bunch of different groups. People tend to group together. That's human nature. That's what we do. And part of increasing acceptance is allowing for the diversity of a group, but also being admitted into a group we can experience rejection when we're not admitted into a group. And so what things with acceptance, it's really about we don't have to agree with something to accept it. So we just have to accept that that's just how this person is. And if we're having some reactions or responses to that, then that's just information for us. But when we accept people for who they are, they just shine. Their authenticity shines. So in order for them to be able to feel freed up to express themselves, the conditions that you're holding in your classroom are a huge part of that. So it's really just celebrating being exactly who you are as a teacher, being your authentic self, because certainly we know our middle schoolers and high schoolers can tell when we're not authentic. So practicing acceptance is very important when you're feeling like if you don't fully understand, or if something is not sitting well with you, then it's just about accepting that that's what is, and allowing it to be, because it's not ours to change. Compassion. So compassion is care and suffering for self and others. So it really starts with ourselves. All of these practices start with ourselves and they extend out, because that's how we're in relationship with each other. So when we have compassion for LGBTQ plus students, all those risk factors that I reviewed that stem from the rejection, and everything is impacted as a result, just understanding if you see a student that is struggling. I mean, we have the peer dynamics, which are peer dynamics, and then you're a teacher, you have the authority in the room. And when we're able to just remember, oh, they're struggling, or maybe maybe there's a particular student that you may have conflict with, and they happen to be identifying as LGBTQ plus. Remembering with compassion, some of the things, those risk factors that I reviewed, because sometimes, not always. So I want to also mention that it's not that all LGBTQ plus students are experiencing all of these things, but some of them are. And so this is what we're going to be focusing on, the students that are struggling it. So practicing compassion and just remembering that, oh, wow, maybe I don't know what's going on for them at home, or maybe you do know what's going on for them at home and they share that with you. So also remembering the developmental stages. We made it through because we're here over adults, but middle school, high school, extremely challenging developmentally. The body is changing so much. We're moving into away from our primary relationships and getting into romantic relationships, intimate relationships with others. And so that's a whole process in and of itself. And so you have people that are experiencing the coming out process and also their developmental changes at the same time. And so that's why it's so important to have environments where they can just be themselves and be who they are. Because adolescence is the most stressful time through human development next to infancy. So just remembering that piece. If you have a middle schooler or a high schooler at home that you're raising, you could probably relate. Okay, so empathy. With empathy, it's really, empathy is something, so I'm sure, well, I'm not sure if I'm always talking about this in our session around mindfulness, but when we get really tired and we're stressed out, empathy is a hard thing for us to access. And it's also deeply connected to our quality of sleep. So if we're not sleeping well and we're not getting our delta waves and we're cycling and during our sleep, we don't have as much, we don't have the capacity to have empathy. So that's something that I wanted to mention around the brain and how we operate, and because this impacts our relationships. So it's being able to really step inside the shoes of another. And this thing, which I mentioned about rejection, we have all experienced rejection in some form or another. So understanding that when I'm practicing empathy for an LGBTQ plus student, I want to know that feels like. I know what rejection feels like, so I can have empathy on how I don't have to have had the same experience. I just have to be able to relate to that feeling. Also, if you have a student that is talking to you about their experience, and sometimes students will come out to teachers, and that is a good thing. It's a sign of trust. And so when they are sharing any kind of information with you that's personal, and really just to the degree that your boundaries are and where you want them to be getting additional help, that's not you as a teacher, being mindful of that. But if they're talking openly, then that is a sign of trust, and allowing space for them to share. So empathy requires some listening as well, and taking the perspective of another person. Understanding. So understanding is the awareness of other people's feelings, also forgiving. So when we're understanding, we're practicing understanding. It's important that we, as the adults, we have a good understanding of our own gender identity and gender, how we feel comfortable expressing our gender and our own sexual orientation. Because if we don't have that clear understanding for ourselves, then that can negatively impact our interactions and our relationships with others. So you have ways that you can demonstrate understanding by putting up signage in your classrooms and messaging around on your classroom walls that validates the experience. Using words that are expressing sexual orientation and gender identity that are respectful. And then if you, with the pronouns, because the pronouns are their personal pronouns. So people will let you know what they, if they want to use, sometimes students are using different pronouns at school than they are at home. And so it is really going to be particular to the environment that they're in. And so if you're not sure about pronouns for the students, you can certainly ask. You can also introduce yourself using your own pronouns. That's totally up to you. And then just understanding that every student is on their own journey of self-discovery. It's theirs. And so we get to bear witness to somebody's unfolding, and it's not ours. So our role is really supportive and allowing. Patience. So this one is hard, could be hard for people. If you have I'm patiently impatient most days. It's why it's a practice. It's like, sometimes we want something right away, and sometimes people can wait, but it is a practice. And so with a coming out process, sometimes it can be, because it is so personal for somebody, it's important that we just allow people to do that on their own and not rush that. Just that identity exploration. So that rushing the process, or just understanding that if you have a student that's talking to you about whatever their process is, that just encouraging them to have patience with it. Maybe if you have experienced or heard negativity around you about LGBTQ plus students, sometimes it can happen with colleagues, then it's being, the thing with increasing understanding is the only way we can do that is providing new information. And then someone will decide whether or not they want to apply it, and how they operate. So just practicing patience. And then just knowing that there's also, because the world feels like it can be spinning really fast sometimes. So just knowing that even when the language seems to be changing really quickly and rapidly, and you're not sure what terminology to use, then it's okay. Just let it, just whatever new information comes through, just take it in. And if you make mistakes around maybe misgendering somebody, have patience with yourself, because they're going to let you know. Kindness. So kindness, tenderness, and consideration towards yourself and others. Kindness can go such a long way because it's so important. So if you see a student that you know that's LGBTQ plus, and they dyed their hair, they put on, they started wearing different types of clothes, and they're expressed, you can tell there's this whole unfolding. This is like they're exploring. When you see something you think is cool, just give compliments. Compliments feel good. They just feel good. And if I'm on a journey of trying to like have my outsides match my insides, it helps when the people around me can reflect that back. And so if you see, oh, that's a cool, I love that hair color, and you have to really like it to give a compliment, because the genuine compliments are really important. But that means the world to that student, because you're noticing, shows that you're paying attention and you're attuned to their expression, and it feels good. So you want to do that. And if they're having a hard time, it even feels better, because they're like, okay, she sees me, or he sees me, or they see me. It's about that being seen and being heard. So also knowing that if they're experiencing rejection outside of the school setting, or sometimes it can happen in the school setting, that your kindness really does matter to them. Respecting, so we have due regard for the rights and wishes and traditions of others. So with school, because it is for everyone, it's important to respect difference, because everybody's coming from a different home. And so sometimes you're going to have some commonalities, and sometimes you're going to have some clashes. And so it's important to have an environment that respects everybody and respects the traditions and the identities. And so knowing that all LGBTQ plus students have right to equal treatment like everybody else, and using the pronouns. So that's a form of respect by using their pronouns that reinforces that sense of self-identity. And we know, so this is the legal realm when you have a student where they are coming out to you at school and they're using different pronouns and names at school than they are at home. You as an educator must protect that. And we need the student's permission to be able to share that with the parent, which is can be a source of conflict for some educators, because it's this, you know, where the laws and your role as a teacher, it can maybe feel a little bit sticky. That's why it's important at any time in your work with these students, and if you're needing support, that you reach out to your direct supervisor and you get some guidance on this, so that you're not feeling like you have to have all the answers. Inclusion is a very, very important part of belonging. There's a distinction though. So with inclusion, I can include you in something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I feel like I belong. So that is the relational piece. So I know, so we can usually get the sense for when we feel like we don't belong somewhere. You're like, okay, this is not the place for me. So that the way that happens is through relationships. So your classroom and your relationships with their students are really primary to this. So it means that we're providing equal access and opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. So the ways that we can practice inclusion, we're going to be talking, Sam will be sharing some information on a curriculum, just a sample classroom lesson for y'all if you'd like. Again, around the classroom with your communications that you post and how it reflects the LGBTQ plus experience. If you're aware of, well, I think almost all of your sites have Be Yourself clubs in the high school district. I think they do. So being informed yourself of when they happen and who the go-to person is great, because it just lets you, if it comes up with a student, oh, did you know there's a Be Yourself club? So that will be good for you to just file away if you or if you already know, that's fabulous. And then when you are introducing yourself, you can use your pronouns or in your email signature or your Zoom profiles. If y'all are in a place where you're doing anything virtually with students, having that in your you can rename yourself that way. So non-judgment. Judgment is what we do. We judge all day. We have to get places, so we have to make judgments. And sometimes when we have it's an automatic thought that is part of it's a filter. So it's the automatic thought that comes from the filter is the judgment. So it's like what I need to do, and then the way I see I need to do it, and the way I understand it. So when we practice non-judgment, it's letting go of what those reactions, thoughts, feelings are that are filtered, and letting go of them and not having them get in the way of how we're relating with the people that we're interacting with. So when we are practicing when we are judging, we are not in the present moment. So we're going into the mind and we're thinking about, we're processing it, we're thinking about how we're going to respond, react. So it's just bring yourself back to the present moment. And when we're in the present moment, we can see all beauty. It's everywhere. The people in front of us, they're beautiful. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but it's true. So it's when we practice the non-judgment, it brings us back. So it's like you notice you have the judging mind. That's part of mindfulness, just bringing you back. Okay, what's going on here in this interaction with the student? If you're having judgments about that student and they're related to so two different things, how they're behaving and then how they're identifying, so it's like, it's not that it's important to make this distinction around what you're making the judgment about. So if you are judging based on, you're having a reaction to how they're identifying and their sexual orientation and their gender expression, and there's a judgment there that's negative, then that's where we're going to encourage you to practice non-judgment, because it's about being back into this environment where everybody belongs and everybody's welcome. And we can have our judgments, but it's more about how we communicate them or don't communicate them. What do we do with them? Okay, so I'm going to touch on a couple of things, and then we're going to move into, Sam was going to talk on specific behaviors that can hurt and help our relationships with LGBTQ plus students, but there's a couple slides here that I just want y'all to think about for yourselves, and because it's about your personal journey. So some things that I invite you to think about for yourself, because this is about what you bring into the relationship with the students. So growing up, did you think of yourself as a boy or a girl or both or neither in some way? And then how did you come to that recognition? When was that? When did you have a very firm sense of, I'm a boy, I'm a girl, I don't feel like I don't feel like either. There's a full spectrum here, y'all. So for yourself, thinking about, when was that for me? When did I know for sure? Typically in human development, it's up to about age 5 with gender, and then we get into more of the puberty times, and that's the sexual orientation piece, because for all the things that I mentioned around us moving away from our primary relationships and starting in our body changing. So what are the messages that you received from the people around you? Because that's very important. This is who was telling you what. When you heard about LGBTQ plus people, were they talked about in a negative light, or were they fully accepted and celebrated? What was that? And then when you heard the messages, did they make sense to you? Or did you agree with them, or did you disagree with them? Because we can have a sense, because we can all be raised in, we can be raised in a particular religion and believe up until a certain point. And then they actually, I believe something different. That's how we grow and we evolve. And sometimes that doesn't happen at all. Sometimes it's like it stays the whole time. So you can be raised in a particular faith or religion and stay fully identified with that. You can add to, or you can completely leave, or not have a practice at all. So it is so personal. So then what was your first defining moment of gender? I'm focusing more on the early childhood days, because that's really where that is. What was the defining moment for you in your life? And then thinking about the kids, the schools that you went to, did this come up much? And if it did, how did it come up? And how were these kids talked about? Because that shapes us too. Or if you were going to church and involved in a particular religion, how was that? Were the LGBTQ plus people embraced, or were the messages you received that gay people will go to hell, or that you were born this way, and if you change, then that's not God's plan. So there's a lot of different messaging. So that's important to think about. What did your parents think, or whoever raised you think? Because we're not all raised with our biological families. So, and then how is all of that, your ethnicity, your faith, your class, your community, how did that influence you? Okay, so now we're going to move on to the professional piece, and there's just 3 questions. The personal was a little bit more involved, but this one is have you thinking, how have LGBTQ plus issues shown up in your classroom? How do you see it? And then what kinds of, you're here today, which is great, but what other kinds of professional development opportunities have you received, and best practices? And then what is your own personal comfort level with discussing LGBTQ plus issues and diversity? So with all these groups, so with your colleagues, how comfortable are you? Parents and caregivers when this comes up, and then also with the students. So I think at this point, this is my last slide, y'all. This is Brene Brown. If you don't know Brene Brown, of her work is wonderful. It's really all about vulnerability and authenticity. This quote is, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. So with that, I will hand the mic over to Sam.
Thank you so much, Casey. All right, y'all. So I'm going to be covering behaviors that hurt and behaviors that help, and give you some examples and talk about, how we can, change the setting in our classrooms to be more inclusive and making sure all students feel safe and welcome. So first we have telling jokes about LGBTQ plus people. So, sometimes we'll hear students say jokes or even saying things like, that's so gay. And, if, sometimes if teachers, you know, disregard it or just don't really mention or talk about really in depth about why, you know, it's inappropriate, it's offensive, it's harmful, then, you know, they think it's okay to say. So, you know, in a moment where a student may say that's so gay, you know, with the epicenter, what we do is we address it and we first, you know, ask them, what do you mean by that when you say that's so gay? And so, you know, it'll really kind of make them reflect on, okay, well, why am I saying this? And you know, some responses we'll get is, oh, I meant it's stupid, or I meant that was dumb. And so what we can say is, you know, well, if that's not what it means, you know, and give, you know, other alternatives, or just, you know, say, well, if that's not what you meant, you know, you shouldn't be saying that because it's harmful, you know, not only to, you know, other your peers, but it's also harmful to us, you know, as people who respect the LGBTQ community and who have, you know, not only like friends, families, people that we know, but just as a community, we want to make sure that we're having a community of care and acceptance, and addressing it immediately is really important. Also, you know, using or allowing the use of derogatory language about LGBTQ plus people, that can really hurt a student, and especially if they identify as LGBTQ plus. I know that words, you know, really do hurt, and they can be carried for a long time. And I can share a little bit about, you know, my own personal journey. I remember, you know, being in school and I heard, you know, another student um, call me a fag, you know, and it was just like, where did that even come from? Like, it really did hurt a lot. And I carried that with me throughout, you know, that year at school, and just not feeling safe where, you know, I thought I could just be myself. And it was, you know, through passing, but it was just really, you know, like um, hurtful to hear. Making negative comments about a student's clothes, hairstyle, or makeup as they explore their gender expression. You know, this can be really impactful about, you know, who a student is. And so when students are going through this developmental period of time when they're exploring their gender, they're exploring their identity, you know, their gender expression can be really important and significant to who they are. And by hearing negative comments, this can really negatively impact their self-view and their own, you know, self-worth even. Going on into refusing to use a student's personal pronouns and name. Like Casey was mentioning earlier, it is really important to respect a student's self-identity, and including their own personal pronouns and names. This is really huge because it's essential to who they are. And it's validating when we do respect a student's name and pronouns. And then moving on into sharing religious or political views that negatively impact and stigmatize LGBTQ plus people. Like Casey was mentioning earlier, we all have our own lens or, you know, filter that we have, and we have to really check that at the door when we come into our place of work. And, you know, whether it's a classroom or office space, we really need to make sure that we're not bringing that into a space where we want to have all students to feel welcome. And then finally, shutting down dialogue about the LGBTQ plus community. And I think, you know, with shutting down dialogue or not being willing to talk about, you know, topics like LGBTQ plus related topics is kind of sending a message that, oh, in our classroom, we don't, you know, want to talk about that, or, you know, it can be harmful because students want to feel seen, as Casey was saying earlier, and heard and validated as well. And they, you know, have every right and deserve to. So Casey, if you don't mind going to the next slide, we'll now be covering the behaviors that help. And so we have partnered with KC before on, providing LGBTQ plus best practices. And these are some, practices that you can incorporate in your classroom to help promote an inclusive learning environment. So first off, we have designate. So designate your classroom as a place where all are welcome. And you can do this by, having inclusive imagery in your classroom, or, safe zone stickers. And we can also provide some links and resources as well afterwards if you're interested, on imagery that you can include on your door, or something that says this is a safe space for everyone, and just making sure that it reflects that in your classroom so folks know that you are a safe space to come to. Next, we have provide. So provide authentic compliments on gender expression. Just as Casey was saying, it can really make a whole difference in that student's day, or even, just in general, their self-worth. I think authentic compliments are really, really great to students, because they also feel seen and heard and validated with those authentic connections that you have with your students. Then we have use. So use students' names and pronouns that matches their gender identity. We can't emphasize this enough, because this is a student's, it's who they are. And we want to make sure that all students feel valid in who they are and who they're, learning themselves to be in this time of exploring their, gender and their sexual orientation. Then we have talk. So talk with students about LGBTQ plus topics when they open the dialogue, and not being afraid to, talk about it. And then also not being afraid to make mistakes. Sometimes we won't get everything right at first, and it's a learning process as well. It's also an unlearning process as well, because there's some things that are developing, and language is evolving. And, there may be terms that you aren't familiar with, but the best you can do is really just continue to educate yourself on LGBTQ plus best practices, or ask a student, what does that mean to you? Because, there are some terms that are different based on each person, and we're all individual. We have our own definitions of what terms mean. So I think ultimately just respecting a student and their right to self-identify is really crucial at this point. Educate. So educate yourself on LGBTQ plus best practices. Again, we, the Epicenter has worked with Monterey County Behavioral Health and Casey on, making sure we can provide these series of trainings on LGBTQ plus best practices, and what that can look like when working with LGBTQ plus youth. And so, please feel free to reach out if you're ever interested in attending some of these trainings, or have it tailored to your classroom, or other things you can do is research local organizations, or reach out to us for referrals, because we know a lot of great places, including one, for example, Rainbow Speakers and Friends. They're a really great organization that includes LGBTQ plus panels of individuals in the community who share their stories, their experiences, and through storytelling, they're able to educate the community, including students, around LGBTQ plus identities and what it means to be an ally and active and practicing allyship. Then we have share your pronouns and gender identity. So this is important for folks to know that right off the bat, when you introduce yourself and your pronouns, that can either be a teachable moment if students aren't aware of what pronouns are, or it can act as an open door for students to feel like they can share their own pronouns and gender identity with you. So that's super important to let folks know that you are also self-aware and a safe space to come to. And then speak openly about LGBTQ plus topics as instruction and discussions allow. And something that we're going to be covering in the sandbox is a sample classroom lesson where we will go over some, key historical events and figures in the LGBTQ pride movement and what led it to how it is today. So yeah, I think we'll be covering that after. And Casey, I'll give it back to you. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop share, so I'm going to go away from the slides for a sec. Okay. So we have just a little like I think y'all have a 15-minute break, but is that at 10? It starts at 10. They have a 15-minute break at 10, or is it now? Do y'all know?
Right now it's 10:47. Do you mean 11?
Yeah, at 11. Do y'all get the 15-minute break at 11? I think is what happens.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. So just questions. Do y'all have any questions? Or because one of the things I was wondering, do y'all know what the epicenter does? Because that's another important thing. If you weren't, oh, Patricia's shaking her head because I don't have any. Thank you. Sam, can you share a bit about the epicenter?
Yeah, sure. I would love to. So thank you for joining us today. Again, I'm Sam with the Epicenter. So the Epicenter is a drop-in resource center for youth here in Salinas, and we serve all youth in Monterey County. We're located on 20 Maple Street in Salinas, and so we're like right across from Salinas High School, a couple doors down from that Taco Bell on the corner. And in the background of my Zoom, you can see that this is the center. Looks like a Victorian home. And it does give the sense of a home feeling, and where anyone who walks through our doors are welcome. And I think it's really great to have this this organization here in the community, because this is exactly the place that I needed when I was growing up here in Salinas. We essentially connect youth and young people to resources in the community around education. For example, we can help folks apply for scholarships for different universities, colleges, financial aid, and connect them to alternative educational resources as well. We help folks with employment. So we have partnered with various agencies in the community on helping youth, gain employment, help them with job readiness skills, such as working on a resume, cover letter, doing mock interviews with them, things like that. And they could all do that at the center or at a program that is in an agency in the community as well. We also help with housing resources and connecting youth to housing programs in the community, and as well as health and wellness. And so we have partnered with Monterey County Behavioral Health. We have a very strong partnership and have worked together on, sending our youth as referrals to receiving some mental health services through them, or, other agencies as needed. And we have actually through the Monterey County Behavioral Health internship, they have provided a clinician or on-site counselor to be coming to our center once a week to provide just short-term counseling to help them find the appropriate mental health services they need, and connect them to creating goals and other resources as well. So it's a really great partnership that we have, and I think it's a great place. It's also a youth-run, youth-led center. So we do provide some youth employment opportunities as well. And at our center, we have some on-site services as well, where we have a clothing closet with a shoe rack, hygiene products as well that are stocked for folks who need to gain access to that. We also have a food pantry available with food for folks who are, in need of groceries, and a community kitchen as well. So folks are welcome to, use whatever we have in the kitchen and, appliances. They can access food and, have food for themselves if they're hungry. We used to do a daily meal or snack type of thing. But since the pandemic, we haven't, been doing that, but we do allow for folks to use our kitchen, and the main rule is to clean up after yourself. So we just ask of our youth and young people to do that. But it is, a very welcoming space. We also have access to computers, free printing, and free Wi-Fi available. And yeah, it's a really great place. If you all ever would like to set up a time to, take a tour, you're welcome to reach out. We would love to show you around and let you all know of more in depth about our programs that we have to offer as well, because we do have programming specifically for LGBTQ youth and foster youth and system involved youth as well, where we do have specific employment opportunities and leadership opportunities as well for our young people to find their voice and help create these community events that are for youth and led by youth. So yeah, definitely reach out. I will put my contact information in the chat if folks are interested. And yeah, thank you so much, Casey, for that great question.
Yes,
I have a question.
please.
So I have a particular student that I think the distance learning and all of that has been particularly difficult for. He's gay. He's very, very lonely. He has good friends. He's in my homeroom. And I've asked him about the epicenter. He said he doesn't have a way to get there. Is there any kind of situation where there can be school buses or something? And also, can you recommend some other kind of, is this like a social situation that I can recommend for him, or is there someplace else? That kind of thing.
Yeah, what was the school again, you said?
Everett Alvarez.
Alvarez, okay. Yeah, so unfortunately, we don't have any kind of connection to school buses or means of transportation, but we have done in the past just like transportation forms for folks to fill out and have, parent guardian consent. So one of our staff can provide that transportation through our epicenter. So we can, make arrangements if needed, as we have offered that in the past. And yeah, in terms of things that are nearby Alvarez, I would say, yeah, it's really hard to say because like the epicenter is very unique in the sense that it is a youth-run, youth-led center, but there's the Alisal Family Resource Center I know of, and even on campus, there should be a Gender and Sexuality Alliance Club. If not, we are always happy to help build that foundation of a club on campus where youth have a space to just convene and have that social support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Patricia, I love this inquiry. So tell me more about the YW, your role there.
Oh, hi. I've been sponsoring that group there for about 8 or 9 years. And we're the group, I think, in Salinas and Monterey County that helps the victims of domestic violence. And we like to get guest speakers in there. And it sounds like you would be wonderful if you'd be interested.
Yeah, definitely.
Any of us, yeah. As any way we can give some information to people that will be helpful. But this is why. So one of my main objectives is interconnecting our resources. So by having the epicenter and behavioral health working closely together. So I want this crew to know that just all you need to do to be able to access epicenter is to make a request for assistance for behavioral health, and we can link them. We can link the students. So we can link through the school site. So all that you need to be able to do, and I'm working on the systems piece of this too, because I realize every site has their own system, but really just knowing, I want to spend about just 5 minutes reviewing what's available for students. So, through behavioral health, and then I'll explain how it links into the epicenter.
Thank you.
So we have, let me get back into my presenter. Okay. So like I mentioned, we have clinicians at every single site in Salinas Union High School District. So what I've spent about a year and a half doing is developing a tiered continuum of care, affirmative care for learning communities. So support's available for students, for parents and caregivers, and for staff. And so what we're doing today is a form of best practices, or kind of a hybrid of essential practices for building positive relationships. So we're really working, and I'm working with your district. I'm on your district-wide LGBT, and Sam is as well. We're on the LGBTQ plus task force. And so we're really developing a systematic approach to how we're going to be supporting the district in the tier 1 realm. And for now, in the tier 2 realm, we have Somos Familia, which is a parent caregiver group. So it's open to any adult, any family member that's an adult for an LGBTQ plus student. It doesn't always have to be a mom, dad. It could be an aunt. It could be somebody that's in this child's or this young person's life that needs information and support. And so that's available. We do that on Zoom on Wednesdays. I have 2 behavioral health clinicians that host that. And so it's an open space for people to come in and talk and learn. So it's psychoeducational and gives people a space to just talk out what's going on for them and the feelings that they're experiencing as their LGBTQ plus loved one is on their journey. We also have Positively Us, and that is a skills building group that will be, it's right now we're starting, we have one going at Hardin. Sarah Altman provides this, and we're going to be offering at Washington Middle in the upcoming weeks. We'll start, it's I believe, 6-week series where it's weekly, and we'll go in and provide information on help, like kind of similar, like Patricia, you're talking about helping relationships. How do we identify exploring that and doing that in a safe way around other people that are also experiencing that. And then in the tier 3 realm, we have a family partner that's available. So if you have a family, a parent or a caregiver, an adult that you know that's in our student's life that is contributing to the stress, that's maybe not accepting them and rejecting them, that we have a behavioral health clinician that can work one-on-one with that parent and give them information, or that caregiver or that adult, give them information on what's happening. So it's a one-on-one versus a group setting. You also have a consultation available to you and any adult in the learning community through behavioral health. So it would be, again, requesting a consultation with behavioral health clinician, and they can provide information. So it's whatever you're experiencing with the student in this realm and getting some guidance on that and getting some support. And then ultimately, if they need therapy, and a one-on-one therapy, behavioral health can provide that. But we go through your whole PBIS, or if it's a wellness center, how I know each side is a little different. But however you're getting help for your students or for consultation for yourself, whatever system, if there's not a system right now, then let me know. But definitely, I want you to know that there's these supports that are available. And then the youth advocate is available through the Epicenter. And so that is a peer-to-peer support. Sam, can you speak just briefly about the youth advocate role?
Yeah, so we have, youth advocates or, peers at our center who are available to provide peer-to-peer support, and that includes, someone there to listen, somebody there to help them, connect them to resources in the community, and just provide a safe space where they can, have somebody there who is a supportive person in their life.
Okay, y'all, we're right at 11. You need your 15 minutes so you can come back. And then we're going to do, Sam prepared a fabulous Pride, just a slide deck that you can use in your classroom if you so choose. And that can hopefully spark some dialogue. We'll be happy to answer any other questions. So we'll meet you back in 15 minutes. And I dropped the slide deck in the chat. Okay, so we'll keep the room open, right, Sam, and just keep it. You want to hit stop record early, and that might would that chunk it into 2?
Okay, so now I'm going to be sharing my presentation. Here we go. And then feel free to interact and, put questions in the chat or comments, or unmute yourself if you'd like to kind of chime in. This is really just a sample classroom lesson on LGBTQ plus Pride Month. And thank you, Casey, for getting this wonderful template. And I believe you used PowerPoint for this. So I know Casey can probably share the blank template with folks if they're interested, or I could also share this one as well. And this is just to kind of go over some, key topics around LGBTQ Pride Month and the events that led to it as well. All right, so here we go. And, something that the Epicenter does with all of our, presentations or support groups with youth is agreements. And I'm sure you all have some form of this as well to, make sure that we have an inclusive and safe learning environment and space for folks to share. So these are the agreements, some sample agreements that we have is one mic, one diva. So this is just to kind of state that one person will talk at a time. We have Oops, Ouch, Educate, which is also a tool that we use during our trainings. And this can be used in a space where, for example, oops is if somebody said something that may have harmed someone. Ouch is being able to acknowledge that and apologize, and educate is learning from that and moving forward. And this is a great tool to use in spaces where, we come into spaces where with our different perspectives, our different backgrounds, our different values and views. But we want to make sure that we are, respecting folks. And if we say something that may have harmed someone, we want to acknowledge that and move forward and, apologize. Shared versus learned. So what's shared in this space stays in this space, and versus what's learned in this space leaves this space. So things that are, personal stories, for example, are, confidential, and making sure that folks are in agreement that that will stay in that space. But things that are learned, like concepts about, being an ally, things like that, I think that can be learned and taken into practice in every day. Then we have practice self-care, which is a very, very important part in any space that you're involved in. And we want to make sure the students are, taking care of themselves. And in any moment, if, within that space, if somebody says something that's, could be triggering, or, they don't feel, comfortable, or they need a moment or a quiet, space or something, I would designate an area of the classroom just to have for folks to really just kind of have a place to be with themselves, and, either have interactive activities such as coloring, or even just like a place to journal or something with like fidget toys or things like that. I think is, can be helpful. And then we have take space, leave space. So we all have those folks in our, our spaces that can, really have a lot to say, or, doesn't feel, shy, or, has that comfortability to speak openly and speak out. And then we have folks who are more of, on the introverted side, who doesn't usually speak out. So we want to make sure that folks are taken into consideration, so everybody has a chance and moment to shine and to share what they would like. So for folks who are used to taking a lot of space, is kind of taking a step back, and for folks who want to have a chance to have a chance to speak, making sure that they have that opportunity as well. And then we finally have open heart, open mind. So in these spaces, we, especially around LGBTQ topics, it can be, a very sensitive topic for folks. So we want to make sure, like I said, as we all come in to this with our different perspectives and lenses, that we all have an open heart and open mind. because, some of these topics may be new to folks, and we want to give everybody a chance to take in that information and making sure that we're in a space where it is safe and inclusive for all. So these are the agreements before the lesson. And all right, moving to the next slide, we have the introduction. So this is a chance for you to talk about and state the significance of LGBTQ plus Pride Month. What is LGBTQ plus Pride Month, and why do we celebrate it? Why does the United States celebrate it? And how do other countries celebrate Pride? And I think it's really important to discuss what led to LGBTQ plus Pride, and also what started the LGBTQ plus rights movement. And I'll be talking about this in a little while when we go over the history. But this can be a chance for folks to reflect. And I didn't mention this earlier, but it would be really cool to have some kind of survey to pass out to students before this presentation, with things like they want to know and things they have questions about, or if they need any additional support afterwards, or even if they would like that one-on-one to kind of go over how they're feeling about it. I think that's really important to have folks, even just having a slip of paper where they can share and pass it back to you afterwards, to have any questions they have, they can talk to you about it, or you can also recommend them to like a counselor, or even other places such as our agency as well, as we work with youth and young people who are have those questions, and we can help with support and referrals to agencies that can also support them. And then tell your story. So what does LGBTQ plus Pride Month mean to you, and why is it important to you? This is a really great chance to let folks know that you are, an ally, and you're somebody who is a safe space that they can come to, and why this, Pride Month has significance to you. And then we move along into the overview. So this is a chance to go over some topics of what you're going to be discussing. Like I said, this is a sample. And we have, history. So talking about the events that led up to the LGBTQ plus Pride movement, interesting facts. So these are some things you can talk about, current events or new facts that are interesting to folks. Key people. So these are, people who have been instrumental in the LGBTQ rights movement and Pride, and talk about their achievements and successes in life. And then arts and literature. So this is a great chance to highlight some folks who are within the arts, and poets and authors and different figures like that who are LGBTQ identified, who have made significant contributions to history. And then how to celebrate, and things that you can do, and even at home to research and look up different LGBTQ identified artists and authors, speakers, every type of person. And then a conclusion, and this will be a chance for reflection, and you can do kind of activities with your students as well. And then finally Q&A. So that's a chance to answer any questions if folks feel comfortable enough asking that afterwards, or like I said, having some kind of survey or slip of paper for folks to be able to ask questions, not so out and open. And then we have, all right, we're diving into history. So like I said, this is just a sample of some historical events throughout the timeline. And, you can tailor it to however you would like to. These are just some events that I thought was important to introduce. And so we could start off with the Stonewall riots. So this is actually what helped begin the LGBTQ Pride and LGBTQ rights movement of where it is today. And this occurred in 1969. On June 28th, this was when police raided a Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in New York City. So at the time, this was kind of like a regular thing, as LGBTQ folks were criminalized a lot, and just for being themselves. And this event, led for the patrons to resist the harassment, and riots ended up emerging, leading to the gay rights movement, which is now the LGBTQ rights movement and Pride of how we see it today. So the very first Pride actually began in June of 1970. And this is when, there was Pride parades that began in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And the term gay pride was actually first used during this year as well. Then we have the pride flag introduced. And so Gilbert Baker was the creator of the very first design of the pride flag. And this was on June 25th, 1978, where the flag was flown in San Francisco during the Pride event. During the 80s, and we have 1987, where the AIDS memorial quilt was actually displayed for the first time in the National Mall in Washington, D.C. for the Lesbian and Gay Rights March on Washington. This was really significant because during this time, the AIDS and HIV epidemic was really huge, taking a lot of lives. And this memorial quilt was actually one of the largest community art pieces in the world at the time. And this was a really big, significant day. We also have the International Transgender Day of Visibility. So this was in 2009, and on March 31st, activist Rachel Crandall, who started on kind of like a grassroots holiday through Facebook, organized this day to dedicate this to honor transgender and gender nonconforming people, and also highlight, the importance of, protecting and honoring our trans folks, and just like the issues that can arise from being transgender and gender nonconforming. And it is, observed to this day. We also have marriage equality in 2015. So this occurred on June 26th, when the Supreme Court issued its ruling in the case of Obergefell and Hodges versus Hodges, granting folks of the same gender or same-sex couples to marry. So I have my reference down at the bottom. And like I said, there's so many more historical events and, contributions made by the LGBTQ plus community. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about the two folks who were a part of the Stonewall riots, who were pioneers of the LGBTQ rights movement and Pride itself, in the next coming slides. All right, so we have interesting facts. So this is where you can list some interesting facts about LGBTQ plus Pride Month. And here's some examples. These were actually from the slide template itself, but I added a little bit to the first one. So the LGBT rights movement in the US was kickstarted in 1969 with the Stonewall riots, led by Marsha P. Johnson, who was a Black trans woman, and Sylvia Rivera, who was a trans Latina woman. And it's really important because, at the time and to this day, trans women of color have seen more violence and anti-LGBTQ violence as well. And we want to make sure that we are honoring our pioneers of the LGBT rights movement and their lives and their legacies, and making sure, that we, are recognizing the contributions of folks, and especially, folks who may have been overseen or overlooked or not really mentioned at all in history. It's really important to be able to highlight them and their contributions. And then the rainbow flag, like I said earlier in the historical timeline, was designed in 1978 by Gilbert Baker. And then finally, President Obama announced the designation of the first national monument to LGBTQ plus rights in 2016. So these are just a few interesting facts. Definitely there's a lot more out there, which will require some research. And we'll move along into key people. So this is where you can choose, a few notable people of LGBTQ plus community and discuss their lives and accomplishments. And so here are some examples. We have Bayard Rustin, who was an American leader in social movements for civil rights, socialism, nonviolence, and gay rights. And this particular person was actually an influential advisor for Martin Luther King Jr. at the time of the civil rights movement, which was really huge. But because of this person identifying as gay, they weren't really, and they were just behind the scenes, because at the time it was very controversial, and he kind of had to work behind the scenes to be an advisor. So yeah, this is a really big one. We have a more contemporary person right here, Alok, who's an American writer, performance artist, and media personality who performs under the name Alok. Alok is gender nonconforming and transfeminine and uses singular they pronouns. So I think this is a great person to introduce as somebody who is gender diverse and uses they them pronouns. And this will be a great opportunity to talk about the significance of pronouns and what they are and what it means. So pronouns being words that we use to describe ourselves, or the words we use to refer to ourselves as. So this can be she, her, hers, he, him, his, they, them, theirs, for example. And we have seen a lot of folks who are gender diverse or transgender who would like to use the they, them pronouns, and it fits them, and it's great and it's valid. So I think by introducing a figure in the LGBTQ community who uses they, them pronouns is really important. And look at them, they're beautiful. So it's really great to feature folks who are outside of that gender binary, and featuring all types of folks from the community. And lastly, we have Janet Mock, who was also part of the template, and is a great, oh my gosh, an amazing individual. So Janet Mock is an American writer, television host, director, producer, and transgender rights activist. Very, very well known for their work in the FX TV show called Pose. I don't know if anyone has seen Pose. If not, it's a very, very wonderful show. A lot of wonderful actors who are, identify as Black trans women, and folks who are gender diverse. And it's highlighting, just about what folks from the LGBTQ community, specifically trans folks in New York City during I believe it was like in the 1970s, 1980s. And it's just a great show. So if you have a chance to check out this show, yes, please feel free to check it out. All right. Yes. Oh, it is on Netflix. Thank you, Casey. Next up, we have some arts and literature. So this is a chance to do some research on, authors, on music and artwork. And these are just a few examples. So, provide examples of art and literature that are significant to LGBTQ plus Pride Month. And we have the writings of Audre Lorde, who is self-described as a Black lesbian mother, warrior, and poet. And she dedicated both her life and her, creative art and talent to fighting the isms of the world, including injustices of racism, sexism, classism, and homophobia. A really great person. I made a link on the slide to oh my gosh, I went to it. So as you can see, it'll go to the Google search of Audre Lorde, and you'll be able to find out, more about about these folks. And you can also link it to articles or different things around these folks as well. I don't know, how do I get back to, okay. Sorry about that. And then we have the music of Little Nas X, who is a hip hop R&B artist, and is very popular right now in the music industry. And I know that a lot of youth will know their music. I don't know if this is, some of their music is, yeah, definitely out there. So I know that they have definitely pushed the boundaries of, gender expression, and just in terms of their music and, their music videos as well. So I thought I would feature them. And the artwork of Frida Kahlo, who was openly bisexual at the time. And during this time in the 1930s, 1940s, it was just really, really pushing the boundaries of, sexual orientation, and within her artwork as well. It was just incredible. And, I think it's important to feature folks like these, to talk about, their contributions, to art and to music and to literature, and talk about them as people, and just, their contributions. So we have this as an example. And like I said, this is just a template. So there's definitely, so many more key figures in art and literature that are significant to the Pride Month. And then we have how to celebrate. So this can be an activity, this can be an assignment, this can be something where you, find some ways that you can celebrate Pride Month. You can ask students to also, write about this. And here's, a few examples. So discover LGBTQ artists, and it can, have a link to different artists as well. Read LGBTQ plus art authors, and this could be, research, what LGBTQ authors are out there, and going on into, listening to LGBTQ plus musicians and their work in the music industry, and then learning about LGBTQ plus history. So we gave a little example with the timeline, but, going more into depth about Pride Month. And this could be something too, where you assign, presentations for the month, and have folks learn about different artists and authors, musicians, and folks from history. So we have that. And I believe the final piece of this is a reflection. So this can be an activity for students, breaking up into groups of 2, and maybe it could be folks who they don't normally, speak with, and share something that they learned or found interesting. This is a time really to just kind of reflect on all of the information, process it, and, apply it to their lives and how they show up for LGBTQ peers and, students, or even themselves. Then, finally, a space for question and answers within this presentation. And this can also be for right now, if folks have questions or comments or any kind of feedback for this presentation. And like I said, I can share this with everyone, and I'm sure that we can also share the blank template if you'd like to start from scratch. So is there any questions that we have at the moment? Feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat.
Question.
Yes.
First of all, I wanted to say I learned that Little Nas X uses they, them pronouns, which I was not aware of. So thank you. I have a student and I teach middle school. So they're much not on their journey as much as high schoolers are. Mm-hmm. But I had a girl this year who asked to use a different name. And what threw me off is she didn't want to use a male name. She wanted to use a different female name. Right? Mm-hmm. So I almost said to her, and I've never had this happen to me in my teaching career, had a student ask to use a different name. And so at first I said, well, I'm going to need your parents' permission to do that. That was my first reaction. Mm-hmm. And then I didn't do anything. I sat on it. for, I don't know, maybe a week. I didn't contact her parents. And then I just decided to go ahead and use it. Fine. You know, it makes her more comfortable. It's what she wants to do. Great. I'm cool with it. That's fine. So I never reached out to parents or anything. But I was just wondering, is that common? I mean, is that just her exploring who she is and that has nothing to do with maybe her sexuality or her gender or anything? And it's just her being in a middle schooler? Did I do the right thing not contacting parents? I just didn't know how to roll with it.
Hey,
The
can
right
I ask
answer
a
for that?
question?
Yes.
Can
go
I
ahead.
ask a question?
Yes.
So I'm just curious because I'm high school. I have students all the time who prefer to be called by a different name. Is that the same? I mean, is it just a nickname? And how would you respond to someone who has wants to use a different nickname? Just out of curiosity.
So one thing I want to just talk about is in the other session, remember when I mentioned about the legal piece? So Julia, yes, you actually did the right thing because it's tricky. When a student wants to use different names and pronouns at school than what they're using at home, as an educator by law, you keep that to yourself. And the student must give permission for you to share with the parent, which is a little counterintuitive, maybe. But you did actually legally the right thing by not bringing it to the parent. And then Jennifer, what was your piece?
Well, I was just saying that I have students all the time who prefer to be called, you know, I ask them in the first couple of days of school, if there's a different name they'd prefer to be called. And it has really nothing to do with gender identity or sexuality or anything. It's just, what would you like to be called by?
Yes. That's wonderful.
And actually, this reminds me, a totally weird situation. When my daughter was in 9th grade, her history teacher called home and referred to her by the name Lindy. Well, Lindy was my daughter's boyfriend's big sister. And she was apparently using Lindy's name in class, which I was like, who?
Wow.
But she was, I don't know, honoring her boyfriend's big sister by saying, oh, that's what I go by.
Mm-hmm.
But the history teacher called and had a concern about Lindy. I was so confused. Anyway, that's off topic, sorry.
Yeah, thank you all so much for these great questions. Do we have any other questions from folks?
Well, I just have one about kind of why I came to this session in the first place. So I have a gay student in my homeroom, not the first time. He has some emotional issues. I've sent him, honored his request to go to our wellness center on more than one occasion. But I also have a student who's like very religious and very conservative in the same class. That student said some things that I think would have been very offensive. I had an open discussion with him on a day that the student I would have been concerned about wasn't there. But he was saying, this is unacceptable. It's not part of my beliefs. And I tried to kind of talk about, I kind of approached it from a couple of different angles, like, feelings and not okay to tell someone to shame somebody, but also what is it your business who someone is attracted to? Does that make it okay for you to tell them they're not worthy? But I think the thing that really struck me was, I don't know that I would have felt okay. I would have felt really on the spot to try and have that discussion had both students been there on that day.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think what Sam, remember when you were talking about when you just asked people, we just be more curious. So this comes up because we all, as adults can have this firm, like rooted belief in something. Students can also, and so it's really just helping them because they're adolescents or teenagers the
Mhm.
prefrontal cortex, it's under construction still. So they're really helping them learn how to take another's perspective as part of the work. And it's really, well, and I hear what you're saying is would you been comfortable having that kind of dialogue with both of them there? And they're all still in the same space. And so how you facilitate that kind of dialogue is, it can be intense, but it's still, you can do it in a way that's respecting both perspectives. So tell me more about how you see this, but not in a targeted way towards another student, but tell me more about that, because we're wanting to learn more from a curious place. If you can't tell me what to believe, I can't tell you what to believe, right? And then Sam, would you add anything?
Yeah, I mean, just exactly what you were saying, making sure that all students feel safe. And they're coming from different places, but as long as we're not specifically targeting or attacking anyone, especially in the classroom, and making sure that like every student has a right to their own beliefs and values, but in a way that it's respecting one another, and we're honoring our differences, and being able to make peace with that. But that is a very, very difficult, I think, kind of like intense situation. And yeah, I mean, if both students have been there, how to navigate that, would be, I think, just making sure that each student feels like they are, valued, and they have self-worth, and that it's, a safe space. So I think, even in places like that, introducing agreements, making it, a part of your classroom is, what kind of classroom agreements are we going to have, so that all students feel safe in their own identities, and respected and valued, because we want all students to have that safety.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, Patricia, I have trouble with the agreement of adjectives in Spanish and French.
Yeah, so in Spanish, I'm not sure about French, but in Spanish, folks have, instead of, I could type it in the chat, they use, instead of like the A or the O at the end of like, ella, eo, they would use either an E for ella, or X for AX. But it really depends on the person. So it's really up to, how they would like to be referred to in the other language. And I'm not sure about French. I don't know if you have any insight, Casey.
I don't speak French. Does anyone else here speak French? I have 15 people and 3 of us don't know. Maybe that's everybody. Okay, I'm gonna put in the link for someone asked around Sandbox link again. Oh, okay, French teacher. So yeah, we'll have to consult somebody that knows French, and I can see where, it's like also what everything that is gendered, like brother, sister, niece, nephew, like how do you do that? When there's a shift, and then we have in the family system, sometimes families that are not using the pronouns that our students are identifying with and using themselves. And then you end up in this it's kind of confusing, our language. Okay. So we'll need a French expert, Patricia.
Oh, I see. So using adjectives like, okay, because in Spanish, adjectives are definitely, masculine, feminine. But again, it's the same with adjectives. So like, let me just put in, for example, that can be like for hermosa or hermoso. I've seen people put an X at the end. So I'll put it in the chat. And yeah, I think it's definitely, language is evolving. Like I said, it's always evolving. And there are definitely more and more ways of having that in other languages. And I'll see what I can do about, compiling some resources for folks, and maybe sending a follow-up to Brianna, who I think has everyone's emails, hopefully, where we can just like have a share out with the slides and with resources as well. Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Patricia.
I wanted to note that LGBTQ plus History Month is October, and then Pride is June, and I know y'all are usually done like 18th, 19th of May. So like your timing of if you were going to introduce this type of information or lesson into your school year and your lessons, how y'all do that and the timing of it. But I liked that Sam offered some different types of activities you can do, because I think the idea is getting the students engaged and learning. And if you have them doing specific projects on, find your favorite artist or something that will get them curious and looking around, that might be cool too.
Mhm. Awesome. Any more questions before we convene? And I think in the chat, Casey, you put the evaluation. So if you all can please fill out the evaluations before you head out, that would be great.
And then did anyone have issues with signing in? Because I want to make sure you have your links so you have that on record. If you need the links again, let us know, but we have them in the chat from the very beginning. So you have if you went to the very, very beginning of our chat, we'd have we had to sign in twice.
Did you share the link with us for the sample lesson?
Yes, it's also in the chat. It's a PowerPoint deck. So I put 2 attachments in the chat. One was our full deck. Sam will have to, Sam, if you could drop your deck in that has the content. So I have the template, and then Sam is going to drop in the one that they just reviewed for y'all. And so you have.
Yeah, I'll make sure to share that right now.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't see the blank one. I don't see your blank deck.
Okay, I'll
I
put
see
it
where
in
you
again.
said you were going to put it in the chat, but then I'm not seeing it on my end. Sorry.
Okay, I'm putting it in again. And make sure it gets back in. So it says sample classroom lesson. Did that go through? Hopefully. Do you see it now? Hopefully.
No, sorry. It must be a problem on my end.
Okay. So
Sorry,
Julia Bravo, I will send it. I'm going to send it also to, because my thing is I'm not yellow Google, and I live in the Microsoft world. And so I will get this deck to Brianna. So if you can't get to any of the materials, Brianna will be our resource. And thank you for being in our rainbow room, everybody. Really grateful that you're here.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And enjoy the rest of your break.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Patricia.
I'll go ahead and stop recording.
Thank you so